Getting people in your precinct involved. Precinct Chair Training, Brazoria County Republican Party. The very first thing you need to do as a precinct chair is to take an inventory of known Republicans in your precinct that might be willing to help you do your work. Sit down and make a list of people that you know are Republicans. Actually, you probably want to keep this list in a spreadsheet because this is going to be the beginning of your precinct Republican database. You want to think about people that live near you and always have a Republican candidate sign in their yard during campaign season or bumper stickers on their car. Think about people who proudly fly the American flag in their yards, people that you go to church with, or people in your Republican club. This is a list that you are going to be constantly adding names to. This is going to be your list of potential Republican volunteers. The next thing you need to do is prepare your toolbox. Every good precinct chair needs to have business cards with your name, address, phone number, and email address. You need to have a cell phone and a computer, and you need to have some basic computer skills to be able to use them. It's really difficult to be a precinct chair if you can't do this. You need to have a map of your voting precinct. You can find your precinct map for Brazoria County by scanning the QR code on the right or going to the website printed on this screen. If you don't live in Brazoria County, you can Google voting precinct maps in your county and it should pop up. If you can't find it, ask your county chair for help. You need to make a list of jobs that you need help doing in your precinct. Data entry, block walking, phone banking, managing social media accounts, managing your database, working at the polls. The list is kind of long, but that just gives you some examples of jobs you're going to need to do. You can't ask people for help if you don't know what to tell them to do. Finally, you're going to need to gather some training materials, such as handouts, videos, how-to instructions. Once you ask people to help you do the precinct work, you've got to train them to actually do the work. Ask your county chair or your SREC member to give you access to some of these training materials. Republican Party of Texas has a variety of training materials that are available to you. At this point, you're probably going to need to plan some sort of get-together, and you want to invite all the people on your Republican list. It doesn't need to be fancy or expensive. It can be at your house or it can be at a neighborhood park or a local restaurant. But there really is no substitute for an in-person gathering. And here's a little tip. Anytime you gather Republican voters together, you want to be sure and collect data from them. You always want to have a sign-up sheet that you can collect names, addresses, emails, and cell phone numbers, because this is going to be very important to add to your database spreadsheet. Once you know who the Republicans are in your precinct, it's really not hard to engage them. If you know they're Republicans and you know they're patriots, they probably want to help get other Republicans elected to office. You might say something to them like this. Some of you know that I'm the Republican precinct chair in this area and we have an election coming up. I want to be sure that we elect Republicans to every office in our precinct because we want to continue to enjoy low crime and good schools and low taxes. But there's a lot of work to do and I need help. So I'm wondering if some of you might be able to assist me with and give them a list of the jobs that you think you're going to need help with. Don't get discouraged if you don't get a lot of people volunteering at first. It takes time to build your volunteer list. All you really need to get started are 1 or 2 people willing to help you. Remember, you're going to continually gather names of potential volunteers as you go. Also, don't take it personally if someone just comes right out and tells you no. This happens, trust me. You just thank them for listening to you and you move on. Not everyone is going to want to help you, and that's okay. Now you've got your volunteers. What do? What do you tell them to do? You want to draw up a blueprint for your precinct. Exactly how do you draw up a blueprint for your precinct? Well, that depends on you, your precinct, and your particular volunteers. One point that really needs to be made here is this. Except for your statutory responsibilities to serve as a voting member of the County Executive Committee, there is no job in your precinct that cannot be done by a volunteer. So the only thing you really have to do as a precinct chair is attend your County Executive Committee meetings and participate as a voting member of the Executive Committee. Everything else you can delegate. At this point, if you haven't already done so, you need to either walk or drive around your entire precinct. You want to take note of any gated communities, apartment complexes, subdivisions, natural boundaries, any kind of natural division within your precinct. This will help you as you prepare to set up a structure for the volunteers to do the work of the precinct. You need to take your precinct map with you and make some notes on it and divide it up into sections. How many sections will depend on how many volunteers you have and your precinct, how it's divided up. You also want to mark on this map where these volunteers that you've recruited live. It'll be important to know who lives in which section of your precinct. Now, following this slide, there are some suggestions for how to build your particular precinct structure. But please understand that these are only ideas. You are going to have to figure out what works and what doesn't work in your precinct. I call this structure Option 1. Option 1 works best for large urban and suburban precincts. Let's say that you have a large precinct in the city. Maybe you have a couple of gated apartment complexes or gated subdivisions of single-family homes. Maybe you just have a large section of city blocks and streets that sort of crisscross each other in a grid-like fashion. You need to somehow divide your precinct into sections that make sense, given everything you now know about your precinct. Then you need to be able to assign a neighborhood captain to each of these sections. The neighborhood captain is going to find block workers within those sections to help do the work of the precinct in that area. This will be things like block walking, phone calling, registering voters, etc. The precinct chair is always the central manager and is the only elected party official that can serve as a voting member of the County Executive Committee. This cannot be delegated out to a proxy. You can't send another person in to the Executive Committee meeting to vote for you. But every other job in your precinct can be done by a volunteer. The precinct chair is going to recruit 3 to 5 volunteers in this particular Option 1 scenario and make them neighborhood captains. The work will be divided up into areas, and then the neighborhood captain is going to try and find block workers within those areas to help do the work of the party. The precinct chair will have neighborhood captains that report directly to them, and then the block workers will report directly to the neighborhood captains. This is option number 2, and it really works better for smaller neighborhoods and more rural areas. In this scenario, instead of dividing your precinct up into sections, you will divide the work that needs to be done into categories. For instance, you may want to have an especially friendly and extroverted volunteer be your block walking and outreach captain, and maybe you have a tech-savvy volunteer that you want to ask to do the social media work and maintain your database. Again, you're going to have to figure out what will work best in your precinct with your volunteers that you've recruited. There is no set way to divide up the work, so please feel free to experiment with different setups in your precinct. You can always adjust your precinct structure down the road as your precinct needs and your volunteers change. Don't be afraid to try, fail, change things up, and then try again. This is a little more detail about the option 2 precinct hierarchy. Again, we have our precinct chair, who is the central manager, the only elected party official, the only voting member of the county executive committee. The precinct chair is going to appoint a block walking or outreach captain, a phone banking or information captain, a social media database captain, and maybe a campaign materials captain in order to do the work of the precinct. All of these captains will report directly to the precinct chair. As you grow your team, here are some final thoughts. You can get people to help you by simply asking them. Once they say yes, give them a title, an area of responsibility, and a specific job to accomplish. People need to do work that they enjoy and that they are good at. Get to know your volunteers so that you know where to place them so that they will be most effective. Mentor and train your volunteers. Teach them what you know. Invite them to get involved. Take them with you to executive committee meetings, which are open to the public. Take them with you to your Republican Club meetings. Meet with them regularly. People don't volunteer because they aren't asked. And people quit volunteering because they aren't thanked. So remember to thank your volunteers. And we want to thank you, precinct chairs, for all your hard work and dedication. You are truly appreciated in Brazoria County.